All right, so there's something that I need to talk about. Some of you might know already, but for those of you that are new to my channel and my content, I'm a veteran. I'm not saying that's the most important thing about me or the only significant thing about me, but for this video, it matters for the context. Just hang with me while we go through this. Recently, there's been some changes with an ongoing Supreme Court battle between the government and some trans people in the military. Essentially, the argument that the government is making, this is led by Pete Hegseth. It's his initiative. I think this is also large in part due to Project 2025. It's long been an issue for the right to go after trans people in all walks of life. There's been lots of laws targeting them, including in some states where literally there's like one trans person, which is pretty atrocious. I will tell you my bias. I'm not going to get into my political ideology here. Foundationally, I'm pro-human rights. I don't care where you come from or how you decide to live your life. I believe all of us have human rights, and I do believe our Constitution guarantees certain rights, our Bill of Rights guarantees certain rights, but more importantly, and the law, we're supposed to have equal protection under the law. Here's why this matters. Effectively, the argument by the government is that this is somehow related to our national security and our military readiness. They're effectively saying that aspects of the trans people's identity and the supports that they need have a negative impact on military readiness. I think this is a gross argument, an attempt to get deference from the Supreme Court because they have been shot down on other arguments that they've made because it's clear sex discrimination, which it is. But there had been sort of a freeze on the attempts to remove people that are trans from the military, which has now been lifted. And Pete Hegseth, head of the Department of Defense at this point, has issued a memorandum that they will start kicking people out of the military within 60 days, which I think is a gross offense. I think it's a major injustice. And that's not just because I'm defending trans people, because they deserve to be defended. They deserve to have the same rights as all of us do. But it's an injustice, and it's not right. As somebody who has served in the military, let me tell you about my story a little bit, right? I served in the New York Army National Guard for 8 years. My original contract was 6 years active, 2 years inactive, ready reserve. I served all 8 years as active in the Army National Guard. So towards the last 2 years of my service, I volunteered to re-up and make one of my last 2 years as active status so I could deploy with my unit to Iraq in 2008 and 2009. And I would have had an opportunity to go home while I was in country because my last year would have been up and I would have been on an active ready reserve and I could have gone home. I re-upped for another year. So I finished my service in Iraq and finishing up as I went back home. Thankfully, I only had a handful of bumps in the road during the course of my service in terms of being in dangerous situations. I was among the lucky, and I have different thoughts on service in the military than I did before I joined. But I can tell you what it means to serve and what it takes to serve. So everyone, and I do mean everyone, in the military, in our military today, it's a volunteer service. So you go talk to a recruiter, and that's a screening process. As long as there's no reasons for them to disqualify you, like certain health conditions and things like that, you can talk to a recruiter about the multitude of ways that the military won't accept you. But everybody gets through that. So these trans people did that. Then once you are volunteering to join, you're going to go to what they call MEPS. That's like a medical screening thing. So they check you out there and you have to take the ASVAB. It's like a military aptitude test. That's also a screening process. Again, they do that. They pass all the screening checks, they pass the basic competencies. Also helps you identify what kind of military career, what kind of military occupation you can have. Because there's qualifiers for that. And then, once you sign your contract and you're good to go at MEPS and all that stuff, you're gonna go to basic training. And again, there's some more sort of screening that happens there, believe it or not. You still have to be good to go. Through basic training, which is very difficult, you go through training and you have to pass standard. You have to meet standard all the time. And they'll threaten you over and over again the consequences of not meeting standard. But you have to pass that. And you have to, I think it's like, I don't know, it was like 9 weeks of basic training when I joined. It might be a little higher now. I think it might be like 10 or 11 weeks, something like that. And then you go for your military occupation schooling, advanced individual training. You had to make it through basic training, and then you also have to go and make it through advanced individual training. And it's a little bit different for the active duty soldiers than it is for Army National Guard and other reservists, but we all have to go through all of this stuff, all this screening, and you have to meet standard and you have to be able to cut the mustard, so to speak. All these trans people did that, and many of them, for Guard people, a lot of people sort of know this. You serve 1 weekend a month in the Guard, and then 2 weeks of annual training every year. And then you're also eligible for getting activated at any time. Active Guard, or like Guard soldiers, sort of live a double life. Like they have their civilian life and their civilian jobs and all that. And then at a moment's notice, their life can get completely upturned. That happened to me at least a couple times where I had to do stateside missions. And then when I got deployed to Iraq, right? Your whole life is uprooted. Everybody that is trans in the military, or whoever you are in the military, that's what you're subject to. And the reservists, I would argue it's very difficult for Guards people, because you have to live that double life, and a lot of times what you do as a civilian may have nothing to do with what you do in the military. And we still train, and we're still expected to maintain the same standard no matter what we're doing or where we go. And sometimes we may not even be doing our military occupation specialty. Like when we went to Iraq, I had a bunch of soldiers with me that had different jobs that they specialized in, and they did something else when they were Iraq. In Iraq, they got like cross-trained, and not a lot of training, but some, and they were tasked for missions. And that's military life. And then other people do it full-time, and that's a different lifestyle. I can't really talk about that because I didn't do that, but I know people that did. But these people that volunteered, that passed standard, many of them served 4 years. I heard just a really sad story, which is sort of my inspiration for this video today, May 10th, 2025. It's about 7 p.m.-ish right now, where I was literally like almost brought to tears this morning when I saw that video, because it breaks my heart to know the people put a lot of their life aside to join and serve, that did everything they were supposed to do and passed standard. They served, I'm assuming honorably, because this particular soldier was in the military for 18 years, serving as a trans person. I don't know when they did their transition, and I don't fucking care, because that's healthcare. For trans people, they go through that whole process, the gender affirming care. I really wish the people that are very small-minded meaning like you don't have a complete understanding of this. I'm not going to sit here and insult people right now, but I could very easily rip into people that are atrocious towards the trans community. I don't have a tolerance for anybody targeting other people in an unjustified way, and trans people get targeted so badly. I can't imagine what it was like for these trans people to serve among so many different types of people from all walks of life. I served. I know what that's like to serve alongside fellow soldiers that some have college educations, some don't. Some have like a more blue collar background, and like I don't discriminate against anybody for what they need to do to survive and how they choose to live their life. As long as they are taking care of business for themselves and the people they care about, and they're not doing any harm to others, that's perfectly fine. But for people that have served honorably, that sacrifice themselves, like, people don't understand, when you join the military, you give up a lot of rights. You give up a lot of rights, and you give a lot of freedom, up a lot of freedoms, and you're subject to a different standard. You're effectively up against a different legal standard. The military has its own uniform code of military justice. If there was ever any issues in the military with these trans soldiers, if there was any sort of conflict whatsoever, like, the military folks have a way of addressing things. They have processes. They have things that they can follow. And I know personally that, like, it's not always followed based on, like, the letter of what's expected, but they have their ways of dealing with things that are a problem. And if these people were able to serve, especially for that long, and they put their time in and they worked, I know they would have to work hard, because it is not easy living life under military service. It's a lot of sacrifice, and it's a different kind of life. And I think for them to just unceremoniously be tossed out now, after serving for more than a decade, in some cases, what's going to happen? Are they going to be dishonorably discharged, and are they going to lose their benefits and health care and all that stuff? Like, this is just discrimination. It has nothing to do with military readiness. Some people in this country have a tendency to say that we have the best military fighting force in the world. But when they say that, trans people were included in that. But now they're going to be excluded for some BS premise. If there was issues with individual soldiers and they were not able to perform their job, the military has a way of addressing that stuff, whether it's they help to correct them, or if they can't do their job, they would be discharged. The military can deal with that stuff. And from what I have understood, I haven't heard any examples of problems with trans people. And I know that we would hear about it because we have, most of our media is very right wing. They've studied this. The right has dominance in that space. We would have been hearing about it over and over and over again, about problems with trans people in the military. We just would. And we haven't, because I don't think it exists to any significant extent. I think there's plenty of problems with people in the military that are people that I worry about, like kind of right-wing extremists. We know those guys are in there. We know that people that have been found to be at, like, KKK meetings and other white supremacist groups and that kind of stuff. Like, I worry about that kind of stuff having effect on military readiness and compromising the integrity and unit cohesion and all that stuff. I think that's a problem. But I don't think trans people are an issue, and I think this is wrong. And I want to talk about it. Proud of myself. Well, whatever. I was going to say proud of myself for holding it together, but I have no problem if I show emotion, because that is a strength. Being willingness to be real and show that this is a very painful thing, and it's a disgraceful thing, and Pete Hegseth has no right to be in the position that he's in. We have known this guy has been a problem for a long time, and many service people have objected and raised concerns about it. What I do have an ask for people that serve in the military. I do want you to speak up for your brothers and sisters and fellow soldiers that have served alongside you, and I want you to vouch for them. I want you to speak out against what's happening now in every way that you can. I want you to be letting leadership know that this is wrong and we should reject it. I don't know how we fight this, but I do know that we need to fight, and we need to find creative ways to fight back. I guess that's what I needed to say about this. On a positive note, I did I finally got my first subscriber on this channel, which, thank you for the person that subscribed and commented on my videos. I really appreciate that, and I hope more of you will join in subscribing and clicking the bell and liking and commenting on my videos. This is something I do on my own volition, on my spare time, for what I have, and I talk about issues that I think are important, and I think that regular people should pay more attention to, because we are in a very critical time right now. And if we don't get this right, I'm really worried about the future for, honestly, life on Earth. Not to be over dramatic, but that's where we are right now. The people that are in charge are very dangerous. Many people have known them as the Republican Party. They are now best described as autocratic fascists. If you're not sure what that is, you should look it up. I think it also fits to label it as a kakistocracy. That means rule by the worst of us. And I would say they were chosen by the worst of us too. And if that offends you, listen, we can have a conversation about it, but it was a bad choice. And I really need you guys to work it out for yourself why it's a bad choice. And I'm really worried that many of you will need bad things to happen to you to figure it out. I wish move over to the positions like someone like me has. Patriotism is really about standing up for what's right, standing up for human rights, standing up for all people, especially people we don't know. Being willing to do the right thing for our fellow people, because we are all essentially one people. All people on Earth, we all come from the same place when you trace it all the way back. Despite what we might look like, despite what we believe, despite our different cultures, despite whether we're religious or not, despite whatever gender we identify as, how we like our sexual preferences, all that stuff. And the sooner we dispel a lot of the myths that people have been taught over time that are meant to perpetuate this system that disenfranchises most of us, the better. And I hope you'll follow me for more. Go ahead, click the bell. Please subscribe. I hope you will. And if you have something that you'd like me to record a video and get my thoughts on, go ahead and hit me up. I'm primarily covering things in the political space, but I do have some other little side projects that I will link my other content probably at a later date. I cover things like